The time is at hand.
From the city of crackheads, just on the outskirts of Williamson, West Virginia, you're in Dark Places. I'm Junebug Fugit, and I'm hot off the heels of the Mothman Festival. That was some big fun. We made it on the news again, second year in a row. Last year we were on Fox Nation, I think it's called. I don't know, I don't watch the news and I don't have TV or anything, so something like that. Fox Nation, does that sound familiar? And this year we were on our local NBC affiliate, WSAZ. So shout out Andrew Colgrove. He's good people. He recorded us inside the Mothman Museum and walking around out on the street next to the statue. And we got interviewed in front of the statue. It was fun. So I'm a big time celebrity now at the store where I work. Everyone keeps saying, "Hey, I saw you on the news." And at the end of the day, we went to Village Pizza with my buddy Steve Ward and a couple other men in black. And we had some great pizza. So shout out Steve Ward. And thanks again. It was fun. Well, I got a great show for you. And hope you're all doing good. You haven't lost your keys or anything. Have you heard the theory that Bigfoot is kind of like an interdimensional traveler? He just kind of pops in and out as he pleases? That's what I kind of believe anymore, because I don't see a bunch of Sasquatches just kind of hanging out in the woods and then just hiding whenever people come around. It don't seem right. I think they go other places. I think they can pop in and out of other dimensions. And that's kind of what the topic is for this week. You know, kind of loosely. Windows on another world. Why is it that certain areas of the world seem to be focal points for mysterious happenings? Are these window areas gateways to the unknown? Jenny Randalls discusses some of the known examples. Thanks, Jenny. It has been observed on more than one occasion that there exists peculiar haunted regions upon the face of the planet. These enigmatic window areas, which serve as focal points for UFOs, mysterious animals, and all manner of unusual phenomena, are often as puzzling as the things they host. So wrote American phenomenologist. I want to be a phenomenologist. That sounds fun. American phenomenologist David Fiddler. Thanks, David. As he opened a major survey of one such window in Michigan, USA, for the magazine 40 and Times. Windows, doorways, gateways, or portals into the unknown have been talked about for a very long time. Local legend sometimes associates paranormal happenings with certain spots. Knowes, or Neolithic burial mounds, are often regarded as such magical places. One story tells of two Orkney fiddlers who were walking past a knowe when suddenly, in the middle of a sentence, one disappeared. Years later, the remaining fiddler was passing the mound when suddenly his companion was back. His eye still as bright and his beard still as black as so many years before. On his lips, the end of the sentence he had been saying when he disappeared. A favorite science fiction theme is of the man who suddenly steps through a time or a space warp into another world. The famous movie 2001: A Space Odyssey shows star travelers reaching their destination by such a route. Even modern music ensures that this concept remains in our consciousness. The rock group The Moody Blues had a hit with a song called Slide Zone, describing the effects of falling through a window in the framework of space. So clearly, this is a familiar idea. But just what evidence is there for the existence of such windows? David Fiddler is a member of the Michigan Anomaly Research Group, set to investigate the window concept scientifically. Here is just one example of the kind of case the team has on its records. They believe it suggests that Lake Michigan constitutes a window area. On March 31st, 1897, a brilliant white light appeared in the sky over Galesburg. It was accompanied by a strange crackling sound. 10 days later, fishermen at Pine Lake observed an alien animal, something like a panther. Panthers are not indigenous to Michigan. It made a terrible noise and was blamed for the slaughter of local livestock. On February 6, 1901, a mysterious fall of dust-like material descended inexplicably on Paw Paw on a perfectly calm day. In May of 1954, a motorist at La Porte, a nicely synchronous French name that means the door, observed 3 oval UFOs that gave out beams of light. His car engine and radio failed while the UFOs flew by overhead. 5 years later, a young mother at Sister Lakes started a wave of sightings of gorilla-like furry humanoids, similar to the Bigfoot or Sasquatch. On January 1st, 1970, a gigantic explosion rocked Pullman at 1:15 midnight. Windows were broken, things fell from shelves, and a mysterious large hole appeared in the frozen surface of a lake 200 yards from the shore, throwing great chunks of ice high into the air. The unexplained blast was felt 4 miles away. Lastly, in August 1976, several witnesses at New Buffalo saw a misty white object floating over a field. It was interpreted by one witness as a ghost and by another as an angel. All these and many other weird experiences in the vicinity imply that there may be something strange about the place. Skeptics claim that any populated area would reveal a similar catalog if researched thoroughly enough, but there is sufficient evidence to prove that certain areas record far more than their fair share of mysterious phenomena. The devil provides a clue. Etymological evidence sometimes provides a clue to the discovery of window areas. For if an area has always experienced a large number of strange events, this may be reflected in its name. Loren Coleman, an American writer on the paranormal, has conducted a study of what he calls devil names, locations whose names contain devil or the equivalent in the local language. He theorizes that these places often receive their names because of their reputation. For example, rumors of terrifying encounters would in ancient times have been directly linked with the devil. Coleman analyzed a large number of such places throughout the United States and found that very often they were rich in a wide variety of peculiar events. He concluded geographical devil names worldwide may indicate locales high in Fortean energy and strangeness. These places deserve some extra attention. And related topic, there's a place called the Devil's Bathtub in Virginia, and I want to go check it out one of these days. You know, it makes me wonder how these places got their names. Anyway, David Fiddler concurs. He points to an area around Draguin in France. The name is possibly derived from dragon. And a nearby hill, La Mamount, which translates into English as the Evil Mountain. Several strange incidents are reported to have taken place there, including the appearance of mysterious floating balls of light and the mountaintop confrontation between a car and humanoid figures that emerged from a glow. This kind of light ball phenomenon is in fact the most common occurrence in the apparent window area and must be assumed to be important. The similarity to ball lightning is obvious. Ball lightning, however, occurs in certain well-defined meteorological conditions, whereas there appears to be no such restriction on when and where the window area light balls can appear. It seems fairly likely that the light balls, like ball lightning, are electrical effects, but whereas ball lightning is caused by a static electrical charge in the atmosphere, light balls may be caused by a charge in the ground itself, produced by some kind of magnetic anomaly. The catalog of events at Aveyron in France is typical of experiences at a window area. Francois Lagarde was the author of an excellent study of this affair that appeared in the Flying Saucer Review and the French UFO journal L'Avenir dans la Nuit. The story concerns an isolated farming family who had lived in the depths of the countryside for many years. June 15th, 1966, they saw a series of light balls, which were about 4 feet in diameter, floating about their large farmyard, climbing over hedges and seemingly inspecting things. they disappeared by blending into a large opaque vertical cylinder of light in a nearby field. Over the next few years, these light balls were seen frequently, the cylinder always appearing with them. It was on the night of January 11th, 1967, however, that the family experienced what appears to have been the most bizarre phenomenon of all. The farmer's son decided to take his car and pursue one of the light balls. He saw some of the balls blend into the cylinder, only one of them remaining outside of it. As he approached the object, which was hovering above the road, his car lights and engine cut out. Desperately, he tried to restart the car and turn on the internal light, but nothing happened. He had no power at all. He felt unable to move. Suddenly, a small, saucer-shaped object flew toward him, straight across the fields. It had two small domes on top, and inside, surrounded by a greenish haze, were two humanoid figures wearing green overalls. The UFO came closer, and then departed with a blast of heat. The metallic road sign close to him began to vibrate visibly as the UFO flew away. Eventually, the witness recovered and was able to return home, but he suffered strange reactions for some time afterward. At first, he could not sleep. Then he slept for 20 hours or more. He found himself floating as if out of his body. He also experienced temporary limb paralysis on several occasions. Clearly, these balls of light that seem so often to invade window areas are very odd things indeed, capable of inducing quite disturbing effects. To return to Lauren Coleman's link between devil names and strange occurrences, there may be devil names in Britain, although sometimes they are of a local nature and not readily found on maps. Bogart Hole, Claw, in North Manchester, for example, is so named because of frequent meetings here with the Bogarts, a northern name for spirits or ghosts. One of Britain's most frightening close encounter events took place at the Devil's Garden, a secluded spot beside the River Weaver, near Frodsham in Cheshire. The date was January 27th, 1978, at 5:45 p.m. Four men in their late teens were wandering through some meadows close to a wire. They had to admit that they were poaching, which meant they were rather unwilling to discuss their story. But on this night, they were to bag rather more than they had bargained for. They saw a strange object floating along the surface of the river from the direction of Weaverham. It was about 20 feet above the ground, and at first they took it to be a satellite that was out of control. A Soviet satellite had crashed in Canada a few weeks earlier, so this was a natural assumption. The satellite, quote, a round silvery object with a small skirt underneath, floated down into the nearby undergrowth, emitting flames as it did so. It sat there, immobile and eerie, making a sound like rushing wind. The men were very scared, of course, but well hidden in the bushes, so they felt reasonably secure. They gazed in amazement as a peculiar bluish glow, which may have been ultraviolet light, emanated from the object. It hurt their eyes to stare at it. Just as they were about to run, with thoughts of radioactivity now uppermost in their minds, a man appeared around the side of the object. He surveyed some cows in a nearby field, which were standing unnaturally still, perhaps through fright. A moment later, he went back around the craft and returned with a colleague. Between them, they carried a frame-like structure, not unlike a cage. The men wore silver suits and helmets that bore lamps. They always dress so snazzy. They pulled the large frame-like structure, which appeared to be very light, around one of the cows and proceeded to take measurements by moving some struts up and down. The four men had by now had enough and fled the scene, no doubt thinking that they might be next on the list for inspection. They ran until they reached the village. One of them felt a strong pulling sensation, tugging him backward by his genitals. These were sore for some days afterward, and red as if sunburned. Needless to say, this was out of the question in an English winter. Macabre horror. Undoubtedly the major proponent of the window area theory is American journalist and collector of oddities John Keel. His restless pursuit of the myths and monsters, falling frogs and flying saucers that haunt his native land is pervaded by the wry humor that so characterized the writing of Charles Fort. But to read John Keel's work gives one a sense of macabre horror. It is hard to handle the idea of his characters being real, so it is comforting to think of them as roles for Vincent Price or Christopher Lee. But what Keel had to say, he undoubtedly meant us to take very seriously indeed. One window he claimed to have found is in West Virginia. For months during 1967, local citizens were plagued by a horrific apparition, a winged humanoid dubbed Mothman. There were also cold spots, space messages, and meandering light balls. Warnings were received telepathically and from mysterious aliens that the current Middle East situation might escalate into a third world war, and that a nationwide power failure was imminent. Few people took notice of these things, but Keel knew better. On December 15, 1967, he sat watching the television news, sure that something was about to happen. Over in West Virginia, it was the busy evening rush hour. At Point Pleasant, an old steel bridge carried the road across the Ohio River. Under the abnormal load of a traffic snarl-up, it cracked and groaned, tottered and swayed, and suddenly it snapped. Cars and screaming people were plunged to their doom. Bodies and wreckage floated on the icy surface as the night set in. 38 people were dead. Meanwhile, local residents who had been spared the disaster looked into the sky and saw, bobbing up and down above the river, meandering balls of light. Point Pleasant was right in the middle of Keel's West Virginia window. Through the glass, darkly, a spat of reports of strange phenomena centered on one location can quickly lead to the conclusion that a window area has been discovered. Jeannie Randalls describes some places notorious for paranormal happenings and shows how the legends develop. Thanks, Jeannie. Perhaps the world's most famous window area is the Bermuda Triangle. Through the promotion of numerous writers, most notably Charles Berlitz, it has become widely known, and if fame alone were a guide to the truth, this part of the Atlantic Ocean would be of enormous importance. Unfortunately, it is not. There are a growing number of serious students of the paranormal who suspect that the Bermuda Triangle is a gigantic myth, the product of distortion, exaggeration, and a plain disregard for the facts. Books by Larry Krusch and Paul Begg, a contributor to The Unexplained, have cast considerable doubt on many of the classic cases on which the Triangle legend rests. So one feels entitled to ask, is there any substance to all the mystery? As with all window area cases, this question is difficult to answer. Separating truth from rumor is a tricky, sometimes impossible business. But there are some stories that do at least intrigue, and many suggest there is more to the notion than some people are prepared to admit. Here is one example. An account that was submitted in early 1981 to a British UFO Research Society, the UFO Investigators Network, UFOIN. As a UFO report, although, as will become evident, this is a less than adequate description of its contents. The story came from an elderly seaman, recently retired, who in the autumn of 1928 was a crewman aboard a large tanker. The ship was sailing the Atlantic, somewhere just east of Florida, in the course of a long voyage. At the time, of course, there was no talk of the Bermuda Triangle. The concept had not yet been invented, but it seems, nevertheless, that this is where the ship was situated. One evening at about 8 p.m., the sailor was in his cabin, about to go to the ship's library, as was his custom. Things seemed oddly quiet, so he went out on the deck to investigate. He was disturbed by what he found. The ship was almost totally deserted. He walked the docks of the long narrow tanker, surveying all the places where people should be. He found nothing. The entire crew seemed to have disappeared off the face of the earth. Not surprisingly, the man was a little distressed. His disquiet was not eased as he looked out over the rails toward the sea. For here, too, things were far from normal. The sea and sky seemed to blend into one at the horizon, forming a continuous flat gray surface. The smooth monotony went on, giving no indication of motion or time. Above the horizon, or where the horizon should have been, there was a kind of leaden gray dome that towered in an arc across the bows of the ship, whether part of the sky or some hovering form, the man could not tell. But in later years, pictures of domed UFOs reminded him of it, except that if this was a UFO, it was gigantic. It occupied around 120 degrees of arc. In desperation, the sailor sat down on the deck, on a narrow walkway. Anyone passing along the ship had to come this way. After a few timeless minutes, without a clue where he was or what to do, the man was relieved to see one of his shipmates rush toward him, yelling, "Where have you been?" He told how the crew had been looking for him when he had not turned up for his habitual visit to the library, and had apparently completely disappeared. They had scoured the ship for him, but found no trace. The sailor looked up to find the sea and normal sky once more, and the oppressive feeling of time suspension no longer with him. He did not know what to say, for there was no way that even two people searching for one another on the ship could have avoided a meeting for 10 minutes or more. The walkway was not wide enough for two people to pass each other. Of course, we can do no more than treat this as an interesting mystery story. What status it has as a factual account must remain open to doubt, but it does have connections with other examples of time anomaly. It is as if, for a few minutes, two worlds diverged, as in the parallel universe theory of time, and the sailor jumped out of the time-space lane in which he was previously and subsequently traveling. Perhaps this is indeed what happened, or perhaps there is a different explanation. Stories such as these are the skeletons upon which the Bermuda Triangle myth has been built and fattened up until unrecognizable by writers who have one eye on the extraordinary human interest they possess and another on the possible financial gain. One of the greatest dangers in trying to locate window areas lies in relating things that really do not have any relationship at all. Once a location is credited with mysterious powers, anything and everything can be made to fit with this hypothesis. The process is illustrated by a purported UFO landing in Armstrong, Greater Manchester, England. The object turned out to be nothing more than the planet Venus, blazing more brightly than usual in the early dawn sky, but to the media this explanation was of no interest. What did interest them was the version reported by the witnesses, where Venus became a mysterious flying saucer. Basing their theories on this biased interpretation, a whole host of people started to associate new phenomena with the UFO and its landing site. Indeed, by now, even the light that was originally reported had gone in popular conception to a structured metal disc. Some horses in a field, moving about restlessly, in reality probably bothered by the freezing weather, came to be reacting to a force field generated by the object, and one theorist even concluded that a mysterious epidemic of vanishing cats, lost over preceding months from a local estate, had in fact been abducted by aliens. The Warminster Thing. The most famous window area in Britain is undoubtedly the Warminster Thing. Warminster, a quiet country town on the edge of Salisbury Plain. In late 1964, its peace was shattered by the arrival of what came to be known as the Warminster Thing. The Thing came in several guises: UFOs, bosilites, strange noises, weird animals, and so on. Very soon the entire town was on the lookout for the Thing, which was for a time as famous as the Loch Ness Monster. Warminster was suddenly the place to be if you wanted to see something unusual. Indeed, people still flock there from all over the world to sit and talk to other believers in the thing, or try to catch a fleeting glimpse of the wondrous visitor. Even the local graffiti tend to follow the trend. One wall bears a plea to the aliens, a sign of frustration in the passing years have brought. Go back to Venus. We don't want your lies no more. What was it that made War Minister so special? Its fame began with a rumor that may well have been based on some real experiences. But the place became such an overnight sensation, and fiction became subtly mixed with fact to such an extent that it is impossible to gauge whether there really is something remarkable about the place. There are inevitable suspicions that much of what followed was the product of some kind of human need to believe in the supernatural, and therefore to see it. After having made a long pilgrimage to stand on one of War Minister's chilly hillsides, it would be very difficult for someone to persuade himself that the lights of a distant helicopter just might be something a little more peculiar. And there are many army bases in the area that conduct all kinds of military maneuvers on the plain. Tanks, aircraft, and helicopters, often in unusual configurations, various kinds of flares and searchlights, are all familiar sights to the War Minister residents, but to an outside observer who has come to see the thing, they can prove very deceptive. Over the years, the man who has been mainly responsible for keeping the War Minister mystery afloat has been a local journalist, Arthur Shuttlewood. It is he who first brought the enigma to the notice of the world in his best-selling book, The War Minister Mystery, and many others. He writes with a lively style that endears him to his readers from all over the world. He collects stories of what people have seen in and around War Minister, and he has a few strange tales of his own to tell. All this has ensured continued interest in the mystery, leading more and more people to come and see it for themselves. Some people allege that the military in the area take a special interest in the mystery. There are even claims that they harbor a stack of secret photographs. In the summer of 1981, a couple visiting War Minister for the first time waited on a hillside as dusk set in, and were astonished when a military helicopter came out of the gloom and hovered close above them, the co-pilot leaning right out of the cockpit and staring them down. All this despite the fact that they were on private, not army, land. However, none of this proves anything. Military men are humans, and like anyone else, they could merely have a personal interest in the mystery and not be acting under orders to investigate it. The War Minister case does not stand alone. The same pattern has been repeated, usually on somewhat a smaller scale, in many other locations throughout the world. One of the common denominators seems to be the presence of a focal figure who collects the reports, such as Arthur Shuttlewood at War Minister or John Keel at Michigan. Around them the mystery spins itself. Whether there is anything there to start with, or whether the mystery actually results from their interest in it, is a question that is often impossible to answer. Hilary Evans has analyzed in detail how the mystery of the Welsh Triangle of Dyfed, West Wales, was born. Here, authors of popular books placed up a tiny thread and wove a complex tapestry of distortion, lies, and half-truths, plus a few genuine puzzles. One might be tempted to conclude that window areas simply do not exist. Nevertheless, there is an amount of unimpeccable evidence that suggests that certain areas just might attract strange events. Perhaps one of the best cases is the mystery of the Clabed area of North Wales, deluge of weird events. In the summer of 1976, 3 children of the Sunderland family independently claimed to have seen strange alien creatures and UFOs in fields near Oakenholt, a small village close to Flint Clabed. The report led to a deluge of weird events developing in the family in a sequence of weird happenings. These events did not receive any wide attention in the press, but while investigators were researching them, other people in the immediate vicinity came forward with stories that were strangely similar to those of the Sunderland family. One teenage girl was so terrified by her experiences that she refused to talk to anyone for days. The revelations prompted a search through the records of a local newspaper to see if any anomalous events had been reported in the past. Indeed, they had. Over the previous 10 years, there had been a number of stories of yellow balls of light similar to those seen by the Sunderland family, and anomalous figures of strange shapes. No one had attached much importance to these curiosities at the time, but now they lent considerable strength to the idea that the locality is, indeed, a window area. But what is a window area? The area itself offered very few clues. It was true that it had ancient connections. There were plenty of old monuments and dikes, and the important Roman border city of Chester nearby. There is also a major electricity grid supply station in the vicinity, a factor that has in some suspected window areas proved to be the cause of the appearance of strange phenomena. The area straddles the Dee estuary, a fact that may also be significant. The nearby presence of water is another factor that researchers have sometimes suggested might prove important. Somewhere in the data may lie the reason for the phenomena. No one has yet found out for sure what window areas are, although there is certainly no shortage of ideas. These range from the mundane to the ridiculous and include such possibilities as many black holes, time warps, and doors into another dimension. But gradually, research has found itself settling onto one or two possibilities, and positive progress is at least being made. Light through the window. The existence of window areas has been hotly debated even by those interested in the paranormal, but as Jenny Randall's shows, there now seems to be some scientific evidence for their authenticity. Thanks, Jenny. Are window areas real? I don't like to call them window areas. That never really took off, did it? This was published back around 92. Nobody calls it window areas. I like portals. There should be portals, right? Anyway, many modern researchers certainly argue that they are. Bernard Delaire, a British UFO expert who works on the archives of Contact UK, the world's largest UFO society, has a working background in geography and has taken this problem very seriously. His own research began with a study of the temporal distribution of UFO flaps. Delaire was able to identify two cycles, one of 10 to 11 years and another of 4 to 6 years, tracing these back into history, beyond the supposed beginning of the UFO phenomenon, with Kenneth Arnold's 1947 sighting. He found definite indications of a phenomenon that manifests itself in a cyclic fashion, being much more common at certain times than others. Further research that Delaire has carried out in conjunction with Ahmed Jamaluddin has even revealed a geographical progression for these waves, and explained some of their intricacies. Delaire and Jamaluddin believe that it is possible to predict where and when UFO activity will be strongest. For instance, they pinpointed South America in 1982, North America in 1985-1986, and Southern Europe in 1988. It is not known if they predicted the alleged UFO landing in the USSR in 1989, or indeed the reported increase in UFO sightings in Hungary in April of 1990. Delaire has also carried out a mammoth survey of tens of thousands of reports recorded on computer files in the United States and Britain. His analysis of these reports led him to conclude that he could identify dozens of window areas in many countries. The attempt to establish scientifically that window areas exist goes on. But what if they do exist? What are they? Is a window area generated by the physical features of the region itself, or does the region attract some outside force? It seems that the first theory is more likely to be true. the latter has not missed the correlation between his primary wave cycle, 10 to 11 years, and the cycle of maxima and minima in sunspot activity. In fact, his comparison shows that the occurrence of these two things matches so closely that one is led to conclude that there must be some connection between sunspot activity and peaks and troughs in the occurrence of paranormal phenomena, especially UFOs. Analysis of UFO flaps can tell us still more. The French scientist Dr. Claude Power decided to look at the reports during the Big French Flap of 1954. He compared the varying declination of the Earth's magnetic field with the number of UFO reports. The resultant graph leaves little doubt that there is a correlation between UFO activity and geomagnetic disturbance. Power discovered one more important point. 40% of the cases in this flap occurred within 1,100 yards of a fault zone, a part of the Earth where the surface rocks are impacted against one another. Indeed, fully 20% occurred on fault lines. This could be a highly significant finding. It has been confirmed in a study of the Spanish Flap of 1968. A similar result has been obtained by researchers on the Dragon Project in England, who have found that almost all megalithic sites in the British Isles are within 1 mile of a fault line. Magnetic attractions. Meanwhile, in Canada, Michael Persinger and Ghislaine Lofemier have gone beyond the study of simple UFO reports. They have correlated many different kinds of anomaly with variations in electromagnetic field strength. They feel confident that this demonstrates not only the validity of the window area concept, but also its relationship with electromagnetic radiation. One of their proposals is of particular interest. They suggest that underground, at window area sites, there may be bodies of highly conductive material buried in the rock strata. During increased solar activity, this normally dormant mass could, they claim, become electrically charged and generate a large electromagnetic field around it. This would account for the geomagnetic deviations, and the field would also be detectable at the surface. This massive superfield, they suggest, could have the strength to generate luminous effects in the atmosphere, the balls of light so common at window areas, and more peculiar effects in individuals who happen to be in the area when the superfield is active. It is known that messages are carried in the brain by means of electrical impulses, and it is quite possible that contact with an intense superfield could cause some to experience a kind of brain scrambling electrical interference that could result in hallucinations. It is believed that certain forms of electromagnetic radiation can be heard inside the head as a humming or buzzing sound. Is it mere coincidence that humming is the sound usually on the threshold of audibility that is most often associated by witnesses with the onset of a paranormal experience? Electromagnetic fields can also produce subsidiary effects such as malfunction of electrical equipment, overtiredness, and headaches or nausea. It is interesting to consider all this in the light of the following example. During September 1977, a young couple, Peter and Caroline, were renovating a post office in the Cornish village of Newmill. One evening, Caroline went outside and came face to face with a luminous green and red object about 6 feet in diameter. She called Peter, and they both saw the object float up the ramp of a barn behind the house and zigzag across the field. It then drifted across the moors, coming to rest about a mile away, where it stayed for some hours and was witnessed by around 30 people. The following evening, 4 similar objects appeared. They were again witnessed by several people. Both Caroline and Peter subsequently had to be treated in the hospital. They had stomach pains, headaches, and nausea. No cause was found for this mysterious illness, which seemed to be in some way similar to radiation sickness. After a week, it disappeared of its own accord. It is possible that a massive rock body under the surface may have been responsible for the light ball effect in the atmosphere. The stonework of the old post office could have even channeled this effect as a lightning conductor attracts lightning. Close contact between witnesses and the ball of light may have induced the illness through possible attendant microwave radiations. It is interesting to note that others who saw the object from greater distance apparently suffered no ill effects. This case suggests ways in which a superfield could affect the brain. The ball of light, although itself real, could become a starting point of a complex hallucination stimulated by the intense radiation of the superfield. If the superfield led the electrical channels of the brain to overload temporarily and short circuit, thus causing the conscious brain to switch off, hallucinations experienced during the subsequent period of unconsciousness might be triggered by the sensory input being given to the brain immediately preceding loss of consciousness. And so, the brain might spin a fantasy around this sensory input and its own stored knowledge of UFOs. If the witness does not interpret what he sees immediately before losing consciousness as a UFO, hallucinations experienced during the subsequent period of unconsciousness might be triggered by the sensory input being given to the brain immediately preceding loss of consciousness. So the brain might spin a fantasy around this sensory input and its own stored knowledge of UFOs. If the witness does not interpret what he sees immediately before losing consciousness as a UFO, or if indeed he sees nothing, then the resultant fantasy could take any form, and would probably be associated with his own personal beliefs or fears, or whatever he happened to be thinking about just before the superfield struck. If such a loss of consciousness were fairly short and the witness had no previous experience of blackouts, he might regard the intermediary dream or hallucination as real. Some researchers believe they can explain all visionary experiences in this way. Some light may be thrown on the matter by a study of the medical condition known as epilepsy. This is a temporary brainstorm during which the sufferer loses consciousness for a short time and can continue afterward, not realizing he has had an attack. The interesting thing is that hallucinatory dreams are a feature of epileptic blackout periods. Perhaps the superfield leads to a kind of mass super-epilepsy, in which large numbers of people suffer the same hallucination. While some witnesses of window area phenomena do not suffer hallucinations, but do see some of the attendant phenomena, such as balls of light, and may also suffer physical side effects. Others become unconscious. Time loss appears to be an important feature of UFO contact experiences, and time loss would of course occur if a blackout period were missing from conscious recall. Earthquake lights. Another possibility is that window area phenomena are produced directly by the movement of rocks under the Earth's surface. This work took on a new importance when the findings of a group of scientists in Canada and the United States were released during early 1981. They had examined the piezoelectric effect, in which pressure or tension applied to certain types of crystal, such as quartz, induces an electrical potential. They suggested that stresses in the quartz crystals of certain types of rock might induce electrical activity in the surrounding atmosphere when the rock was under strain, as in Earth's movements. Ionization effects might even be visible as glowing light, rather like a UFO. The scientists decided to test this remarkable idea in the laboratory and found that they could indeed duplicate it. It does seem possible, therefore, that in a laboratory the size of the Earth, the effect could be large enough to create realistic UFOs in the skies above fault zones. Indeed, what are known as earthquake lights have been reported immediately prior to a number of both major and minor Earth movements. Already this theory has been invoked as a possible explanation for the mystery lights, which were seen and photographed over Kaikoura in New Zealand in December 1978. This area has a high incidence of Earth movements. If this theory is to be acceptable, it should be possible to use it to predict the location of window areas. It is interesting to note that, while Britain is geologically rather inactive, two of the major fault zones where earthquakes are most likely to occur cut across Loch Ness in Scotland and Stoke-on-Trent in central England. We miss you, Paul Chadwick. Loch Ness is host to many weird phenomena, quite apart from its monster, and Stroke has for some years been the center of an inexplicably high number of UFO close encounters. But perhaps the piezoelectric superfield theory in some way holds the answer. The window opens wider. There are many possible consequences of this intriguing idea, not least the wealth of experiments it suggests. In the paranormal world, rigorous scientific experiment is all too rare, and serious researchers will be grateful for the chance this theory offers for scientific testing. Some students of Keys have also been intrigued by the idea and have attempted to measure electrical effects at megalithic sites. Notable research has been carried out in England by workers in the Dragon Project at the Rollright Circle in Oxfordshire. It could be that these electromagnetic anomalies can also explain some curious photographic results that some researchers have obtained at megalithic sites and window areas. Using infrared films, they have from time to time obtained unusual light effects and strange images, although nothing was visible to the naked eye on these occasions. It seems that the images were detectable only in the infrared part of the spectrum, but it could be said that these pictures are further scientific evidence for the superfield. It does seem that if window areas really do exist, the concept of the superfield may offer a possible working hypothesis on which to base investigations of the paranormal world. And there you go, window areas, portals. I'm going to call them portals. Thanks to Jenny Randalls for that story. And that's about all I've got for you this week. Hope you enjoyed that. Pretty interesting stuff. If you got a strange story to tell and you'd like to share it on the show, send an email to indarkplacespod@hotmail.com. Thanks to the Nighthawk radio crew. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. God bless.